Welcome to the ABCs of B-movies. 26 films, one for every letter of the alphabet. B-movies don't apologize. They're made fast, cheap, and weird, built on imagination instead of budgets, driven by wild ideas that studios would never greenlight. From A to Z, we're running through films that captured lightning in cheap bottles. Some became cult classics, others remained beloved obscurities, but all of them share that unmistakable B-movie energy. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, 1978. The title tells you everything and nothing. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes is musical comedy horror about sentient tomatoes terrorizing San Diego, and it commits to that premise with absolute sincerity, wrapped in self-aware absurdity. Director John DeBello crafted something that plays like Airplane, crossed with 1950s creature features, where the joke is both the ridiculous concept and how seriously everyone treats it. The film follows a motley team assembled to stop the tomato uprising. A master of disguise, an underwater expert, a parachutist, none of whose skills prove remotely useful against produce. Musical numbers erupt randomly. A helicopter crashes because the production couldn't afford to stage it any other way, so they just kept it in. Tomatoes roll menacingly down streets while orchestral stings play. The special effects are intentionally terrible, which somehow makes everything funnier. What could have been a one-joke premise becomes something more through sheer commitment. The cast plays it straight while surrounded by chaos. Government conspiracies, mad scientists, and vegetables with homicidal intent. The musical sequences are genuinely catchy in their ridiculousness, particularly the theme song that became more famous than the film itself. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes bombed on release, but found its audience through late-night television and home video, spawning sequels and an animated series. It represents B-movie comedy at its purest, taking the most absurd premise imaginable and running with it until the absurdity becomes its own twisted logic. Basket Case, 1982. Frank Henenlotter's Basket Case is New York City grindhouse horror at its grimiest and most heartfelt. Dwayne Bradley arrives in Manhattan carrying a wicker basket containing his surgically separated Siamese twin Belial, a grotesque malformed creature with psychic connection to his brother, and a serious grudge against the doctors who tore them apart. What follows is revenge, horror filtered through body horror, dark comedy, and genuine tragedy. Shot on a minuscule budget in the seediest corners of Times Square, the film captures early 80s New York in all its dangerous, decaying glory. Henenlotter uses real locations, flop houses, peep shows, grimy streets, giving everything authentic texture that no studio set could replicate. The city becomes as much a character as the brothers, a place where someone carrying a monster in a basket barely registers as unusual. Kevin Van Hentenryck plays Dwayne with surprising vulnerability, portraying a man caught between loyalty to his brother and desire for normal life. Belial, realized through stop-motion and puppet effects, is simultaneously pathetic and terrifying, a victim of medical cruelty whose justified rage has curdled into something monstrous. The film treats their relationship with unexpected empathy, even as it delivers shocking violence. The gore effects are crude but effective. The acting ranges from committed to community theater, and the tone careens between horror and pitch-black comedy. Yet Basket Case works precisely because of these rough edges. It feels dangerous, unpredictable, and genuinely weird in ways that polished productions can't achieve. Henenlotter created an exploitation classic about monstrosity, brotherhood, and revenge that still feels transgressive. Chopping Mall, 1986. Jim Wynorski's Chopping Mall asks the essential question, what if mall security robots gained consciousness and decided teenagers must die? A shopping mall installs 3 high-tech security droids programmed to neutralize intruders. When lightning strikes the control system, the robots malfunction and trap a group of young employees inside for a night of laser-blasting, exploding head carnage. The film delivers exactly what its title promises. Shopping mall mayhem with practical effects that remain satisfyingly visceral. The robots, designed by Robert Short, are clunky but menacing, rolling through abandoned stores while delivering deadpan threats in monotone voices. The infamous head explosion sequence became a highlight of 80s horror effects, practical work that still impresses. Kelly Maroney brings genuine charm as the final girl, while Barbara Crampton adds Scream Queen credibility. The film moves briskly through its 77-minute runtime, understanding that concepts this simple work best when executed efficiently. Chopping Mall represents Roger Corman-produced exploitation at its most entertaining, high-concept, low-budget, maximum practical effects. It's pure video store gold. From an era when titles sold themselves and delivery mattered more than depth. Dead Alive, 1992. Before Peter Jackson directed Hobbits to Middle-earth, he made one of the film in cinema history, a zombie splatter comedy where a Sumatran rat monkey bite transforms a New Zealand town into an ocean of blood, guts, and dismemberment. Dead Alive, released as Braindead internationally, follows Lionel, a timid mama's boy whose overbearing mother gets infected at the zoo and transforms into a ravenous zombie. His desperate attempts to hide her condition spiral into absolute carnage as the infection spreads. Jackson approaches the premise with gleeful excess, turning every scene into an opportunity for practical effects mayhem. The film builds from dark comedy to full splatter opera, climaxing in a lawnmower sequence that reportedly used 300 liters of fake blood. Bodies shredded into geysers of gore while Lionel mows through the undead hordes. It's cartoonishly violent, so over the top that it becomes absurdist comedy rather than disturbing horror. Timothy Balmain plays Lionel with remarkable sincerity, making his devotion to his monstrous mother genuinely touching, even as she's literally falling apart. Diana Peñalver brings warmth as his love interest who somehow tolerates the escalating nightmare. The film's heart comes from treating these characters as real people caught in impossible circumstances, which makes the horror comedy balance actually work. The zombie baby sequence alone, featuring an undead infant wreaking havoc in a park, showcases Jackson's willingness to push taste boundaries while maintaining pitch-perfect comedic timing. The practical effects by Richard Taylor and the Weta Workshop team are spectacular, creative, and relentlessly disgusting. Dead Alive represents splatter comedy at its absolute peak. Technically masterful, narratively coherent, and so committed to gore that it becomes its own form of art. Jackson proved he could orchestrate chaos on epic scale years before Middle-earth, just with significantly more intestines. Evil Dead 2, 1987. Sam Raimi's Evil Dead 2 is one of the rare sequels that completely reinvents the original, while staying true to its chaotic spirit. Instead of simply continuing the first film's story, Raimi uses the setup as a springboard for something far more inventive, a delirious mix of horror, comedy, and raw creativity that feels like it's sprinting from start to finish. Ash Williams returns to the infamous cabin, but this time the nightmare is even more unhinged. Demonic forces twist reality itself, turning the film into a non-stop barrage of flying cameras, splattering blood, and cartoonish violence. Bruce Campbell throws himself into the role with wild physicality, selling every scream, grimace, and one-liner with the energy of a man possessed. What makes Evil Dead 2 stand out isn't just its blend of tones, but how confident it feels in its madness. Raimi embraces low-budget ingenuity and turns it into a style. Every shot, every gag, every grotesque effect becomes part of the movie's rhythm. It's relentless, funny, and genuinely unsettling all at once. More than a sequel, Evil Dead 2 became a benchmark for creative horror filmmaking, proof that a director's imagination could turn even the simplest premise into something unforgettable. It didn't just expand a cult classic. It redefined how wild and expressive horror could be when rules went out the window. The Funhouse, 1981. The Funhouse takes the familiar teenage slasher formula and traps it inside a carnival, a space designed for fun that becomes a maze of neon-lit terror. Four teenagers decide to spend the night inside a carnival funhouse as a prank, but they witness something they shouldn't. Now trapped inside with a killer and his equally twisted family, survival means navigating a labyrinth of mechanical horrors and hidden passages. Hooper treats the carnival setting with remarkable attention to atmosphere. The funhouse itself becomes the film's true monster. All flickering lights, distorted mirrors, animatronic grotesques, and hidden machinery that could crush you as easily as entertain. Cinematographer Andrew Laszlo bathes everything in lurid carnival colors, creating a visual nightmare that's both garish and beautiful. The setting feels genuinely disorienting, like being lost inside someone else's twisted childhood memory. Elizabeth Berridge leads the cast as Amy, the final girl who must use intelligence and determination to survive. The supporting teens feel like real people rather than slasher archetypes, which makes their predicament more affecting. Sylvia Miles brings carnivalesque menace as the fortune teller, while the deformed killer, credited as the monster, is played with tragic animalistic intensity. Unlike the raw brutality of Chainsaw or the gothic elegance of Salem's Lot, the Funhouse represents Hooper exploring pure cinematic craft. The film moves with patience, building dread through environment and suggestion before unleashing violence. It's a reminder that Hooper could work within genre conventions while still making something distinctly his own. Ghoulies, 1985. A story about a young man inheriting his father's mansion and accidentally summoning demonic creatures through black magic rituals. The titular Ghoulies, rubbery puppet monsters, cause chaos while darker forces manipulate events towards satanic ends. Director Luca Bercovici creates a tonal mess that somehow works through sheer commitment to practical creature effects and gothic atmosphere. The mansion setting provides appropriately shadowy corridors for supernatural mayhem, while the occult elements, pentagrams, ritual circles, demon summoning, are played surprisingly straight. Peter Liapis portrays the protagonist's gradual corruption with appropriate intensity, while Michael DeBars chews scenery as the warlock manipulating events. The Ghoulies themselves are gloriously ridiculous creations. Little rubber monsters with expressive faces that combine cute and grotesque. John Carl Buechler's Creature Shop delivered multiple designs ranging from imp-like to reptilian, each brought to life through puppetry and animatronics. They don't do much beyond causing minor havoc and looking weird, but their practical presence gives the film tactile charm. Charles Band's Empire Pictures released Ghoulies during the mid-'80s creature feature boom, and while it lacks Gremlins' polish and wit, it found its audience through home video. The film spawned multiple sequels of decreasing budget and increasing absurdity. It represents band-era exploitation perfectly. High concept, low budget, practical creatures, and enough weirdness to stand out on rental shelves. Hell Comes to Frogtown, 1988. In post-apocalyptic America, fertile men are rare commodities, and Sam Hell is one of the last. Problem is, he's also a stubborn loner who the government must coerce into a rescue mission. Infiltrate Frogtown, a settlement controlled by mutant amphibians, and recover fertile human women being held captive. Oh, and they've locked an electroshock device to his groin to ensure cooperation. Roddy Piper stars fresh off They Live, bringing the same everyman charisma to a premise that's somehow both sexploitation and genuine sci-fi adventure. The film plays the absurdity mostly straight. Mutant frogmen are treated as legitimate threats. The post-apocalyptic wasteland feels genuinely desolate, and the mission has real stakes despite the ridiculous setup. Sandal Bergman and Sek Varel play the government agents escorting him, providing both action competence and romantic tension. The frog mutant designs by Steve Wang are impressively detailed. Full creature suits with articulated faces that allow for actual performances. The inhabitants of Frogtown feel like characters rather than just monsters, with their own culture, hierarchy, and motivations. The practical effects work elevates what could have been cheap rubber suits into something memorably strange. Director Donald G. Jackson and R.J. Kaiser balance action, comedy, and surprisingly earnest world-building. The film delivers desert car chases, creature fights, and exploitation elements while maintaining internal logic. Hell Comes to Frogtown represents that brief moment when post-apocalyptic action met creature feature horror, and nobody questioned why. It's absurd, entertaining, and committed enough to its weird premise to actually work. Madman, 1989. Virginia, a young bookstore clerk with a passion for pulp horror novels, discovers a chilling new favorite, a rare book about a deranged, disfigured killer obsessed with a woman who doesn't love him. But as she turns the pages, the line between fiction and reality blurs. Soon, the novel's villain steps out of the story and into her life, leaving behind a trail of murders that echo the book's gruesome plot. Directed by Tibor Takac, best known for The Gate, Madman is a clever blend of slasher and supernatural horror with a metafictional twist. Jenny Wright stars as Virginia, giving the character both vulnerability and strength as she battles a killer pulled straight from the pages. Clayton Rohner plays her skeptical boyfriend, while Randall William Cook, also part of the film's effects team, portrays the monstrous stalker with unnerving presence. The film thrives on atmosphere. Dimly lit apartments, cluttered bookstores, and shadowy streets that echo with menace. The murders are staged with a mix of gothic flair and inventive gore, while the killer's grotesque, self-mutilated appearance adds a memorable layer of unease. What sets Madman apart is its concept, horror that literally comes alive through storytelling. It plays with themes of obsession, imagination, and the dangers of escapism, all while delivering satisfying genre thrills. Though it never reached mainstream recognition, Madman has become a cult favorite for horror fans who love clever spins on familiar tropes. It's both a love letter to pulp fiction and a chilling reminder that sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that refuse to stay on the page. Jack Frost, 1997. Not the wholesome Michael Keaton family film, this is the slasher about a serial killer who dies in a chemical accident and returns as a homicidal snowman. Jack Frost, the murderer, transforms into Jack Frost, the anthropomorphic winter nightmare, terrorizing the small town where he was originally captured. He can freeze victims, impale them with icicles, or just roll over them with his snowy bulk. Writer-director Michael Cooney commits to the absurd premise with surprising sincerity, creating genuine slasher atmosphere despite the ridiculous antagonist. The snowman design walks the line between charming and unsettling. Clearly a person in a costume, but given menacing personality through practical effects and Scott McDonald's vocal performance. Jack delivers terrible winter puns while ending lives, self-aware enough to acknowledge his ridiculousness without winking too hard. Christopher Allport plays the sheriff haunted by Jack's original crimes, bringing real gravity to a film about a carnivorous snowman. The supporting cast treats everything with appropriate seriousness, which makes the horror comedy tone actually work. The practical effects for the demises range from creative to outrageous, particularly a notorious bathtub sequence that pushes the premise to its absolute limit. Jack Frost found cult status through home video, where audiences appreciated its low-budget charm and commitment to the bit. It spawned an even more absurd sequel, and represents a specific brand of 90s direct-to-video horror comedy that embraced ridiculous concepts without apology. The film understands it's silly, but respects the audience enough to deliver genuine creature feature entertainment, rather than just ironic detachment. Killer Klowns from Outer Space, 1988. Klowns from Outer Space operates on pure nightmare logic. What if clowns were actually aliens who hunt humans using circus-themed weaponry? A small town is invaded by extraterrestrials who look like grotesque circus clowns, arriving in a spaceship disguised as a big top. They cocoon victims in cotton candy, hunt with acidic pies, and use balloon animals as tracking dogs, all played completely straight. The practical creature effects are the film's soul. Each clown has a distinct design and personality, brought to life through elaborate costumes, puppetry, and animatronics. The Kyoto brothers' background and effects work shows in every frame. These aren't just monster suits, but fully realized characters with unique movement and behavior. The spaceship interior is a Carnival Funhouse nightmare, all twisted corridors and bizarre architecture. Grant Kramer and Suzanne Snyder play the young couple trying to convince authorities about the invasion, while John Allen Nelson adds heroism as an ice cream truck driver who becomes unlikely savior. The cast navigates the escalating chaos with appropriate urgency, treating the clown threat as genuinely dangerous rather than playing for laughs. This sincerity makes the horror comedy balance actually work. The film's tone is remarkably consistent. Scary enough to unsettle, weird enough to fascinate, and creative enough in its premise to remain memorable. Each clown weapon and hunting method feels like a twisted carnival game brought to life. Killer Clowns from Outer Space became an instant cult classic, representing everything great about 80s creature features: practical effects mastery, wild imagination, and commitment to ridiculous premises. Lifeforce, 1985. Lifeforce is Tobe Hooper Unbound, a gonzo sci-fi vampire epic that swings wildly between cosmic horror, body invasion, and apocalyptic chaos. A space shuttle mission discovers a derelict alien spacecraft hiding in Halley's Comet's tail, containing 3 humanoid beings in suspended animation. When brought to Earth, one of them, a beautiful woman, awakens and begins draining life energy from humans, transforming London into a city of desiccated zombies while she searches for something far more sinister. This is Hooper working with a substantial budget, courtesy of Cannon Films, and he uses every penny to create ambitious, absurd spectacle. The film careens between genres: space exploration, vampire mythology, zombie outbreak, and metaphysical madness, rarely pausing to explain itself. Matilda May plays the space vampire with otherworldly presence, while Steve Railsback delivers an increasingly unhinged performance as the astronaut obsessed with stopping her. Patrick Stewart appears in a memorably bizarre supporting role. The special effects by John Dykstra range from stunning to campy, particularly the climactic scenes of naked vampires ascending over apocalyptic London. Henry Mancini's bombastic score adds operatic grandeur to the chaos. The film's tone is impossible to pin down, genuinely frightening one moment, absurdly over-the-top the next, sometimes both simultaneously. Lifeforce bombed on release and confused critics, but time has revealed it as a glorious mess, a film that refuses to be contained by logic or restraint. It's Hooper embracing maximalism, throwing every wild idea at the screen, and reveling in the madness. Where his early films were claustrophobic nightmares, Lifeforce is cosmic delirium, proving his vision could scale from Texas farmhouses to the end of the world. Maniac, 1980. William Lustig's Maniac is grimy New York slasher horror that feels genuinely dangerous. Joe Spinell plays Frank Zito, a disturbed loner who stalks and kills women across the city, scalping victims to decorate the mannequins filling his squalid apartment. This isn't stylized horror. It's unflinching, uncomfortable, and shot with documentary-like immediacy through the city's most decrepit locations, making Frank pathetic and terrifying simultaneously. He's not a supernatural force or masked icon, but a damaged human whose psychological trauma manifests as brutal violence. The film never glamorizes his actions, instead presenting them as squalid and sad, making the horror feel more real and disturbing. Tom Savini's gore effects are spectacular and shocking, particularly the shotgun to the head sequence where Savini himself plays the victim. The effects emphasize violence's impact rather than celebrating it, creating genuine discomfort. The film's most unsettling element isn't the carnage, but Frank's mundane existence between attacks. His lonely apartment, his fractured conversations with mannequins, his desperate attempts at normalcy. Maniac arrived during the early 80s slasher boom, but stands apart through its refusal to sanitize or stylize. It's exploitation that feels genuinely exploitative, a film that generates controversy through unflinching grimness rather than empty provocation. Lustig created something deeply unpleasant but undeniably effective, New York City horror at its most raw and uncompromising. Night of the Comet, 1984. Writer-director Tom Eberhardt's Night of the Comet imagines the apocalypse as a Valley Girl adventure. A comet passes Earth, turning most of humanity to dust and others into zombie-like creatures. 2 teenage sisters, one who spent the night in a steel-lined projection booth, the other in an equally protective location, wake to find Los Angeles empty, except for the undead and a few other survivors with questionable intentions. Catherine Mary Stewart and Kelly Maroney play the sisters with perfect chemistry, delivering performances that balance genuine emotion with deadpan humor. They're not helpless victims, but capable young women who happen to love shopping and boys, alongside surviving the apocalypse. The film's most iconic sequence has them armed with automatic weapons in an empty shopping mall, trying on clothes while fending off zombies. Pure 80s wish fulfillment. The post-apocalyptic Los Angeles is eerily effective, shot during early morning hours to capture genuinely empty streets and the eerie orange-tinted sky. The film blends teen comedy, zombie horror, and sci-fi survival with remarkable tonal consistency. Robert Beltran adds romantic tension as a truck driver who may or may not be trustworthy, while Mary Warrenoff brings menace as a scientist with her own survival agenda. Night of the Comet works because it respects both its genre elements and its characters. The sisters are smart, capable, and allowed to be feminine without that being a weakness. The film influenced everything from Buffy to later zombie comedies, proving that apocalyptic scenarios and Valley Girl dialogue aren't mutually exclusive. It's B-movie filmmaking with real heart and surprising smarts. Out of the Dark, 1988. When a killer clown starts targeting the employees of a phone sex hotline, what follows is part thriller, part black comedy, and entirely soaked in late 80s sleaze. The women who work the night shift become both prey and protagonists as they try to uncover who's behind the clown mask, a mystery that gets stranger with every call. Out of the Dark is one of those unmistakably LA horror films. Neon lights, palm trees, and constant rain on wet pavement that somehow looks straight out of a music video. It's filled with familiar faces from the era: Karen Witter, Tracy Walter, Bud Cort, all delivering performances that teeter between serious and self-aware. The movie plays like a crossover between a slasher, a neo-noir, and a Skinamax fever dream. It's stylish, grimy, and bizarrely confident in its own tone. The killer's clown persona gives it just enough surrealism to elevate it from typical thriller fare, while the score and cinematography scream 1988 in the best possible way. It's not scary so much as hypnotic, the kind of movie you half remember from a late-night cable run and wonder if you dreamed it. Out of the Dark is glossy trash done right, weirdly seductive, unapologetically 80s, and impossible to forget once you've seen that smile. Phantasm, 1979. Don Coscarelli's Phantasm operates on dream logic and nightmare fuel. Mike, a teenage boy still grieving his parents' death, begins investigating strange occurrences at the local mortuary. What he discovers defies explanation. A tall mortician called the Tall Man is stealing corpses, compressing them into dwarf-sized slaves, and sending them through dimensional portals. Oh, and he's got flying silver spheres that drill into skulls. The film's power comes from its surreal, disjointed atmosphere. Scenes flow like a fever dream rather than traditional narrative. Coscarelli shoots suburban California as a place where the familiar becomes alien, where mortuaries hide interdimensional gateways and marble mausoleums contain cosmic horror. The practical effects, accomplished on a minuscule budget, remain striking. The silver sphere attack is genuinely shocking, and the Tall Man's supernatural abilities feel genuinely otherworldly. Angus Scrimm's performance as the Tall Man created an instant horror icon, tall, imposing, speaking in ominous tones that suggest vast malevolence behind a thin veneer of civility. Michael Baldwin and Bill Thornberry play the brothers trying to survive and understand what's happening, while Reggie Bannister provides grounded comic relief as the ice cream vendor turned reluctant hero. The film's low-budget origins force creativity that becomes its strength. Ambiguity replaces explanation, atmosphere trumps exposition, and the surreal imagery lingers long after viewing. Phantasm spawned multiple sequels that expanded its mythology, but the original remains the most unsettling, a film that feels like navigating someone else's nightmare, where the rules keep changing and nothing is safe. Cue The Winged Serpent, 1982. Larry Cohen's Q combines monster movie spectacle with New York crime thriller, creating something uniquely strange. A flying serpent, an Aztec god, nests atop the Chrysler Building and begins snatching victims from Manhattan rooftops. A small-time crook accidentally discovers the creature's lair and tries leveraging the information for profit, while police detective David Carradine investigates both the monster and a series of ritual slayings connected to ancient Aztec practices. Michael Moriarty delivers a fascinatingly erratic performance as the crook, playing desperate comedy and genuine menace with equal conviction. His character negotiates with city officials over monster information like a hostage situation, creating absurd tension. Carradine brings grounded detective work to increasingly bizarre circumstances, treating Aztec mythology as seriously as any other case. The creature effects by David Allen and Randall William Cook are impressively achieved through stop-motion animation and practical work. Q looks genuinely serpentine and massive, with attack sequences that blend the creature seamlessly into New York locations. Cohen shoots the city with documentary eye, making the fantastic feel grounded in recognizable reality. Q represents Cohen's ability to smuggle weird ideas into genre frameworks, creating B-movies with genuine personality and unexpected depth. It's monster movie, crime thriller, and character study simultaneously, proof that low-budget filmmaking could be ambitious, strange, and thoroughly entertaining without compromising any element. Re-Animator, 1985. Stuart Gordon's Re-Animator is a wild fusion of splatter horror and pitch-black comedy, loosely adapted from H.P. Lovecraft's Herbert West, Re-Animator. It tells the story of Herbert West, a brilliant but unhinged medical student who develops a glowing green serum capable of bringing the dead back to life. What begins as scientific ambition quickly spirals into chaos, gore, and madness. Jeffrey Combs steals the film as West, playing him with manic intensity and deadpan arrogance. His obsession with conquering death turns him into both the film's hero and its villain, a man as dangerous as the creatures he creates. Bruce Abbott provides the straight man as Dan Kane, the fellow student reluctantly drawn into West's experiments, while Barbara Crampton adds both humanity and vulnerability as Dan's girlfriend, Megan. What makes Re-Animator unforgettable is its audacity. The film doesn't just push boundaries, it smashes through them with gallons of blood and outrageous set pieces. From severed heads with a mind of their own to morgue corpses exploding into grotesque violence, Gordon leans into practical effects that are both shocking and darkly hilarious. Composer Richard Band's tongue-in-cheek score, riffing on Bernard Herrmann's Psycho theme, sets the perfect tone for the madness. Beneath the over-the-top gore lies a clever streak of satire. Re-Animator pokes fun at the arrogance of science, the institutions that enable it, and the fragile line between genius and insanity. It's messy, outrageous, and utterly fearless, a midnight movie classic that embodies the wild, anything-goes energy of 1980s horror. Street Trash, 1987. Street Trash is a notorious cult classic directed by J. Michael Muro, blending dark comedy, horror, and body horror in a way that's as outrageous as it is entertaining. Released in 1987, this 91-minute film dives into the gritty underbelly of New York City, where a liquor store owner unknowingly sells a toxic concoction called Tenafly Viper to the local homeless population. The film opens with a shocking premise. When the homeless drink this lethal brew, they don't just get drunk, they melt into colorful goo. The visceral special effects and over-the-top gore create a unique viewing experience that pushes boundaries and challenges the viewer's tolerance for the grotesque. Following the chaos unleashed by the Tenafly Viper, we meet a cast of eccentric characters, including Fred, played by Mike Lackey, and Bronson, portrayed by Vic Noto. Their misadventures unfold against a backdrop of violence, necrophilia, and absurdity, all while maintaining a satirical edge that comments on social issues. With an IMDb rating of 5.9, Street Trash isn't for the faint of heart. It's a film defined by its unapologetic exploration of taboo subjects and its blend of humor with horror. The script is filled with memorable one-liners and outrageous scenarios, making it a distinctive entry in the realm of independent cinema. Though it may not appeal to everyone, those who appreciate its raw, unfiltered approach often find themselves captivated by its audacity. As a quintessential example of 80s B-horror, Street Trash has garnered a dedicated following for its unique take on the horror comedy genre. If you're looking for a film that's unapologetically bizarre and filled with wild imagination, Street Trash is definitely worth a watch. Troll 2, 1990. Troll 2 might be the most infamous, so bad it's good film ever made, a movie so bewilderingly incompetent that it transcends typical B-movie badness to become something genuinely fascinating. Despite its title, there are no trolls, only vegetarian goblins who transform humans into plants so they can eat them. An American family vacations in the rural town of Nilbog, read it backwards, where every resident is secretly a goblin attempting to feed them contaminated food. Italian director Claudio Fragasso, working with minimal English skills and maximum confidence, created something that defies conventional filmmaking logic. The dialogue is bizarre and unnatural. The performances range from wooden to theatrical with no middle ground, and the plot makes decisions that feel randomly generated. Yet the film is never boring. Every scene contains some new bewildering choice that keeps audiences engaged through sheer confusion. The goblin costumes are impressively terrible, burlap sacks with masks that barely move. The special effects are bargain basement, even by direct-to-video standards. The film's most famous moment, "They're eating her, and then they're going to eat me, oh my god," has become legendary for its absurd delivery. Troll 2 was ignored on release, but found cult status through midnight screenings and eventually a documentary, Best Worst Movie, about its legacy. It represents accidental avant-garde cinema, a film where every conventional choice was ignored in favor of something inexplicable. The result is hypnotic, hilarious, and genuinely unique. The Unseen, 1980. Barbara Bach stars in this grimy horror thriller as a television reporter who travels to a small California town to cover a festival, only to find her accommodations mysteriously canceled. A friendly local offers his home for her crew to stay, but the hospitality hides something terrible in the basement. His deformed son, kept hidden from the world and growing increasingly violent. The film operates more as psychological thriller than outright horror for most of its runtime, building dread through suggestion and the host's increasingly uncomfortable behavior. Sidney Lassick plays the father with unsettling charm that gradually reveals itself as dangerous delusion, while Lelia Goldoni portrays his sister with haunted resignation. The basement-dwelling son remains mostly glimpsed until the climax, when the film finally reveals the grotesque secret the family has been protecting. The creature effects are disturbing in their portrayal of physical deformity, treating the character with both horror movie menace and uncomfortable suggestions of abuse and neglect. The final confrontation is brutal and claustrophobic, playing out in the basement's tight corridors. The Unseen arrived during the early 80s horror boom, but got lost among more prominent releases. It's nastier and more exploitative than many contemporaries, willing to push boundaries in depicting violence and disturbing family dynamics. The film represents a specific strain of early 80s horror that emphasized grime and discomfort over artistry, creating experiences that felt genuinely unsafe and unpleasant in ways that served the material. Vamp, 1986. Two college students venture into the city seeking strippers for their fraternity party and stumble into a nightclub run by vampires. Grace Jones stars as Katrina, the club's main attraction. A nearly silent performance built entirely on her otherworldly presence and elaborate body paint. What begins as sex comedy quickly shifts into survival horror as the students realize everyone in the club is either undead or about to become dinner. Director Richard Wenk shoots the Vampire Club with striking visual style. All neon lights, deep shadows, and theatrical production design that makes the space feel genuinely otherworldly. The film's 80s music video aesthetics serve the material well, creating a nocturnal underworld that exists just outside normal reality. Grace Jones doesn't need dialogue. Her physical presence and the elaborate makeup effects make her genuinely alien and threatening, Chris Makepeace and Robert Rusler play the students with appropriate fish-out-of-water desperation. Dee Dee Pfeiffer adds humanity as a waitress, caught in the vampire world against her will. The practical vampire effects range from subtle to spectacular, particularly the transformations and the climactic carnage. Vamp balances horror, comedy, and style without letting any element overwhelm the others. It's not trying to reinvent vampire mythology, just deliver an entertaining genre mashup with enough visual flair and practical effects to stand out. The film represents mid-80s horror comedy at its most stylish, aware of its B-movie status, but committed to making something visually striking within those constraints. Without Warning, 1980. 7 years before Predator, Graydon Clark made a film about an alien trophy hunter stalking human prey in isolated forest terrain using advanced weapons and camouflage. Teenagers heading to a remote lake become targets for an extraterrestrial using living disc-like weapons that attach and drain victims, while a paranoid veteran desperately tries to warn anyone who will listen. Jack Palance delivers an unhinged performance as the veteran who's encountered the alien before, playing paranoia with zero restraint. Martin Landau appears as the local store owner who understands the threat but can't stop it. The young cast, including David Caruso in an early role, handles escalating terror with appropriate urgency. Kevin Peter Hall, who would later become the Predator, plays the alien in a practical suit that's more bizarre than threatening, a lumpy reptilian thing that's effective despite costume limitations. The disc weapons are memorably grotesque, pulsating, organic things that latch onto victims. Stan Winston contributed creature effects work that elevates the technical aspects. It's straightforward B-movie horror that knows its strengths, offering unpretentious alien hunter mayhem before Hollywood did it with 10 times the budget. Xtro, 1982. British horror sci-fi Xtro is deeply, profoundly weird. A film that starts with alien abduction and ends in places most creature features wouldn't dare approach. A man returns 3 years after being taken by extraterrestrials, but he's not quite human anymore. His reunion with his family quickly turns nightmarish as his alien nature manifests in increasingly disturbing ways, including impregnating a woman who births him as a full-grown adult, covered in afterbirth. Director Harry Bromley Davenport creates something that defies easy categorization. The film blends alien invasion, body horror, domestic drama, and hallucinogenic imagery into a narrative that feels like it's constantly mutating. The practical effects are memorably grotesque. The rebirth sequence remains one of the most unsettling in 80s horror, while other transformations involve toys coming to life, a woman turning into an egg-laying creature, and a child developing telekinetic powers. Philip Sayre plays the returned father with appropriate detachment, suggesting something wearing human skin rather than actual humanity. Bernice Stigers portrays his wife caught between relief at his return and growing horror at what he's become. The film treats family dynamics with unexpected seriousness, even as alien horror invades domestic spaces, making the violation feel more personal and disturbing. Xtro doesn't explain itself or provide easy answers. Characters make bizarre decisions, events unfold with nightmare logic, and the climax offers no conventional resolution. It's the kind of aggressively strange film that can only come from low-budget horror unencumbered by studio notes or conventional wisdom. Xtro remains deeply divisive. Some find it brilliant, others incomprehensible, but no one forgets it. You're The Hunter from the Future, 1983. Italian director Antonio Margheriti cobbled together his sci-fi television miniseries into a feature film that's somehow both prehistoric adventure and post-apocalyptic sci-fi. Yor is a mighty warrior in a primitive world who discovers he's actually from an advanced civilization, and his quest for identity involves dinosaurs, cave people, laser guns, and a villain who looks like he wandered in from a Flash Gordon serial. Reb Brown plays Yor with muscular sincerity and a magnificent blonde mane, delivering dialogue with earnest intensity that makes the absurdity somehow endearing. The film careens between genres without warning. One moment sword and sandal action, the next robots and spaceships. The special effects range from impressive miniature work to obviously puppet dinosaurs, all treated with equal seriousness by the cast. The film's theme song, Yours World, became infamous for its synthesizer-heavy bombast and declarative lyrics about the titular hero. It plays multiple times throughout, becoming simultaneously catchy and ridiculous. The action sequences are competently staged, with Yor battling everything from giant bats to android warriors using both primitive weapons and futuristic technology. Yor, the hunter from the future, represents Italian genre filmmaking's willingness to throw everything into the mix without worrying about coherence. It's adventure film, sci-fi epic, and prehistoric fantasy simultaneously, edited together from a longer work with minimal concern for pacing or logic. The result is endearingly bonkers, a film that keeps surprising through sheer audacity and refusal to pick a lane. It's joyfully stupid in the best possible way. Zombie, 1979. Lucio Fulci's Zombie, released as Zombie 2 in Italy to capitalize on Dawn of the Dead, is Italian gore cinema at its most uncompromising. A woman searches for her missing father on a Caribbean island and discovers it's overrun by the walking dead. Not Romero's social commentary zombies, but rotting corpses driven by pure hunger. What follows is relentless, graphic horror, where Fulci's camera lingers on decomposition, violence, and the breakdown of flesh. The film's most infamous sequence remains the splinter through the eyeball scene, excruciating, prolonged, and shot with medical precision that makes it genuinely difficult to watch. It's exploitation filmmaking that pushes past entertainment into something more punishing and visceral. The zombie makeup effects by Gianetto de Rossi are spectacularly grotesque. Worm-eaten corpses with exposed bone and rotting flesh that look genuinely decomposed. The underwater zombie versus shark sequence is practical effects madness. A real shark fighting a stuntman in zombie makeup that's as bizarre as it is impressively achieved. Fabio Frizzi's score adds dreamlike atmosphere that contrasts with the graphic violence. Tisa Farrow and Ian McCulloch play the investigators with appropriate seriousness, providing human anchor amid the carnage. Richard Johnson brings Shakespearean gravitas as the Doctor fighting a losing battle against the outbreak. The tropical setting provides beautiful locations that Fulci fills with decay and horror. Zombie represents Italian horror's willingness to prioritize visceral impact over narrative coherence, creating an experience that assaults rather than entertains. It's Fulci's most famous work outside the Beyond, a film that proved gore could be both art and endurance test. From Killer Tomatoes to Aztec Serpents, B-movies prove that imagination beats budget every time. These films didn't ask for permission. They just delivered the chaos, creatures, and practical effects that kept us coming back to video stores and midnight screenings. If you love the weird corners of cinema, where anything goes and nothing's off limits, hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know which letter deserves a different pick. Thanks for watching. And remember, always be kind and rewind, because every movie is someone's favorite.